The Helix Dominion had ruled the outer spiral of the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their fleet was massive. Their conquered worlds numbered in the tens of thousands. Every species they had ever fought had fallen before them. They had never known defeat. They had never known fear. Then they met Park. Was not a soldier. He was not a warrior. He was a simple engineer aboard a research vessel called the Endless Dawn. The ship carried 47 crew members, scientists, doctors, engineers, people who wanted to explore the stars and learn their secrets. Among them was his wife, a botanist named. She had soft eyes and a gentle laugh. She loved growing plants from distant worlds. She loved more than anything. They were traveling through neutral space when the Dominion raiders found them. The attack came without warning. 3 Dominion warships surrounded the Endless Dawn. The research vessel had no weapons, no shield strong enough to resist military fire. The captain sent a surrender signal immediately. He begged for mercy. He explained they were scientists, not soldiers. They meant no harm to anyone. The Dominion did not care. To them, humans were a pest species, insects crawling on the edge of civilized space. The Dominion had encountered humans only a few times before. They found them weak, primitive. Their technology was centuries behind. Their bodies were fragile. They were short. The Dominion Council had classified humans as biological contaminants and ordered their ships to treat them accordingly. The raiders boarded the Endless Dawn. They gathered the crew in the cargo bay. 47 people stood together, holding hands, praying to whatever gods they believed in. Stood next to, he held her hands so tight his knuckles turned white. He whispered that everything would be okay. He promised he would protect her. He believed it. He had to believe it. The Dominion commander was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. He walked among the humans like a farmer examining livestock. He looked at their faces. He saw their fear. He smiled. Then he gave the order. The soldiers raised their weapons and fired. The cargo bay filled with screams and the smell of burning flesh. Bodies fell one after another. Watched his friends die. He watched his captain die. He watched the young doctor who had just gotten married die. He watched die. She looked at him in that final moment. Her eyes were not afraid. They were sad. Sad that they would not grow old together. Sad that they would not see their home again. She mouthed the words, "I love you," as the plasma bolt struck her chest. Screamed, he tried to run to her. A soldier hit him in the head and he fell to the ground. When he woke up, he was alone. 46 bodies surrounded him. The Dominion had left him alive. The commander had recorded a message. He told to return to human space, to tell his people what happened, to warn them that this was the fate of all humans who wandered too far from their little corner of the galaxy. The Dominion wanted humanity to be afraid. They wanted them to hide. They wanted them to know their place. Listen to the message. He looked at its body. He looked at the bodies of his friends. Something inside him changed in that moment. Something broke. Something darker took its place. He buried them all on a small moon nearby. He dug 46 graves with his bare hands. It took him 5 days. His fingers bled. His back ached. He did not stop. He said their names as he covered them with dirt. He said goodbye to each one. He said goodbye to last. He stood over her grave as the sun set. He made a promise to her. He would not hide. He would not run. He would not warn humanity to be afraid. He would make the Dominion afraid. The next 6 months changed Park from an engineer into something else. He found a derelict mining vessel drifting in an asteroid field. It was old and broken, but he fixed it. He was an engineer after all. Fixing things was what he did best. He gave the ship a name. He called it Promise. He raided Dominion supply convoys and stole their weapons. He studied their technology. He learned their language. He hacked their communication systems and listened to their military channels. He learned their patrol routes, their tactics, their weaknesses. Then he began to hunt. His first target was a small supply depot on the edge of Dominion space. He destroyed it in the night and vanished before anyone could respond. His second target was a communication relay. His third was a fuel station. His fourth was a convoy carrying weapons to the front lines. Each time he struck fast and disappeared. Each time he left no survivors. Each time he left a message carved into the wreckage. Remember the endless dawn. The Dominion could not understand what was happening. Their sensors showed only one ship, one human. How could one human cause so much damage? How could one human evade their patrols, break through their defenses, and vanish like smoke? They called him the Ghost. Soldiers began to whisper his name in fear. They said he was everywhere and nowhere. They said he could see in the dark. They said he could not be killed. The stories grew with each attack. Some said he was a demon. Some said he was a machine. Some said he was death itself. High Admiral heard these stories and grew angry. She was the supreme commander of the Dominion's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. She had conquered 100 worlds. She had crushed rebellions and ended wars. She would not be embarrassed by a single human. She assembled a task force, 500 warships, the finest crews in the Dominion, the most advanced weapons, the most experienced captains. She gave them one mission. Find the Ghost, kill him, end this embarrassment. The fleet launched with great ceremony. The Dominion Council watched and applauded. They were certain of victory. 500 ships against one human. The odds were laughable. The Ghost would be dead within days. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship and smiled. She imagined returning home with the human's head as a trophy. She imagined the celebrations, the honors, the glory. She did not imagine failure. She could not imagine that she and her 500 ships were flying toward their deaths. Far away in the darkness of the nebula, Park watched them come. He sat alone in the cockpit of Promise. He looked at a photograph of his wife. He touched her face with his finger. "They're coming," he whispered, "all of them just like I planned." He put the photograph away and began his final preparations. The hunt was about to begin, but the Dominion did not understand something important. They were not the hunters. They were the prey. The nebula was a place where ships went to die. It stretched across 3 star systems, a vast cloud of gas and rock and dust. The gas was thick and colorful, painted in shades of purple and red and gold. It looked beautiful from a distance, but inside it was deadly. The gas played tricks on sensors. It scrambled communications. It hid asteroids until they were close enough to kill. Pilots who entered the nebula often never came out. The Dominion had marked it as a hazard zone centuries ago. No military ships were allowed inside. Park had spent 4 months living there. He had mapped every asteroid. He had charted every gas pocket. He knew which areas would blind sensors and which would explode if touched by weapons fire. He knew the nebula like he knew his own ship, like he knew his own hands. And he had prepared a welcome for his guests. The mining charges were small. Each one was no bigger than a man's fist, but there were thousands of them, hidden among the asteroids, buried in the ice, floating in the gas. Each one was connected to a network that only could control. Each one was waiting for his signal. Admiral brought her fleet to the edge of the nebula and stopped. She was not a fool. She knew the terrain was dangerous. She knew the Ghost had chosen this place for a reason, but she also knew she had 500 ships. She had overwhelming force. No trap could stop an army this large. She ordered her captains to form hunting lines. They would enter the nebula in waves, spread out to cover maximum area. They would flush the human out like hunters flushing a rabbit from its hole. Wherever he ran, there would be ships waiting. The first wave entered the nebula, 50 ships in perfect formation. Their sensors struggled against the gas, but they pushed forward. They were professionals. They were not afraid of bad weather. Watch them from the darkness. His ship was powered down, hidden behind an asteroid twice the size of his vessel. He could see the Dominion ships on his passive sensors. He could hear their communications on the channels he had hacked months ago. He waited. The first wave pushed deeper. They found nothing. The second wave entered behind them. Then the third. 150 ships now swam through the purple gas, searching for one small human ship. Counted, he waited. He needed them deeper. He needed them committed. He needed them to feel safe. When the fourth wave entered, he smiled. He pressed the button. The nebula came alive with fire. The mining charges detonated in a precise sequence. They were not meant to destroy ships directly. They were meant to ignite the gas pockets around them. The volatile chemicals in the nebula turned into fuel. The explosions created chain reactions that spread faster than any ship could fly. 87 ships died in the first 30 seconds. Some were torn apart by the explosions. Some were crushed by asteroids sent spinning by the blasts. Some were consumed by fires that burned even in the vacuum of space, fed by the nebula's chemicals. The communication channels filled with screaming. Captains shouted for orders. Crews begged for help. Some simply went silent. Admiral watched from her flagship at the edge of the nebula. Her face did not change, but her hands gripped her chair so hard her claws left marks in the metal. "All ships maintain formation," she ordered. "Do not panic, it is just fire and rock. Push through." But there was no formation left to maintain. The explosions had scattered the first 4 waves like leaves in a storm. Ships crashed into each other trying to escape. Some flew into gas pockets that exploded beneath them. The careful hunting lines became chaos. And in that chaos began to move. Promise was not a warship. It was a mining vessel, old and ugly and slow, but had spent months making it into something else. He had stripped away everything he did not need. He had added engines stolen from faster ships. He had installed weapons that a vessel this size should never carry. It was not pretty, but it was deadly. He came out of hiding like a shark smelling blood. His first target was a destroyer that had lost its shields in the explosion, fired 2 missiles into its engine section. The ship died before the crew knew what hit them. His second target was a cruiser trying to restore communications. He cut through its hull with a stolen plasma cutter. His third target was a command ship coordinating rescue efforts. He killed it, and all its information died with it. He moved through the chaos like a ghost. His ship was small enough to fit through gaps in the debris. His engines were fast enough to outrun targeting systems. His weapons were accurate enough to hit critical systems with single shots. He was not fighting a battle. He was conducting an execution. The surviving Dominion ships tried to fight back. They fired into the gas, hopping to hit him. They only created more explosions that killed more of their own. They tried to chase him, but he knew the nebula and they did not. He led them into asteroid fields and gas pockets. He led them to their deaths. Admiral ordered a retreat. The remaining ships began pulling back toward the edge of the nebula. They had lost nearly half their force in less than an hour. They needed to regroup. They needed to rethink. They needed to escape. Had known they would run. He had planned for it. The nebula had only one safe exit corridor. The rest was blocked by dense asteroid fields and gas clouds too thick to navigate. Every Dominion captain knew this. They all flew toward the same path. The path had mined the night before. The retreating ships flew into a wall of fire. More explosions, more screaming, more death. Ships that had survived the first trap died in the second. Ships that had almost reached safety were torn apart meters from clear space. By the end of the first day, the Third Expeditionary Fleet had lost over 200 ships. Admiral stood on her bridge and stared at the nebula. It glowed with the fires of her burning fleet. The gas clouds had turned orange and red with the heat of destruction. It looked like a wound in space, bleeding light. One human had done this, one human with one ship. She finally understood what she was facing. This was not a hunt. This was not a battle. This was revenge, pure and patient and absolute. The human did not want to escape. He did not want to survive. He wanted them all dead. Looked at the reports. 212 ships destroyed, countless more damaged, tens of thousands of soldiers dead, and somewhere in that burning nebula, the ghost was still waiting. She had brought 500 ships to kill one man. She was beginning to wonder if it would be enough. Far inside the nebula allowed himself a moment of rest. His hands were shaking from the adrenaline. His heart was pounding. He had not slept in 2 days. He looked at its photograph again. "I'm not done yet," he whispered, "not even close." He powered up his engines and moved deeper into the darkness. The hunt was just beginning. The Dominion had conquered 1,000 species across 10,000 years. They had fought wars against empires that spanned entire galaxies. They had developed tactics and strategies that had never failed. Their military academies taught the art of overwhelming force. Bring more ships, bring more soldiers, crush the enemy beneath superior numbers. They had no training for what Park was doing. He did not fight like a soldier. He did not follow rules or honor or tradition. He fought like a virus. He infected their formation, spread chaos through their ranks, and killed them from the inside. The second day inside the nebula was worse than the first. Moved through the damaged fleet like a predator through wounded prey. He targeted the weakest ships first, vessels that had lost shields in the explosions, cruisers with damaged engines that could not run, command ships that had lost communication with the main fleet. He finished what his traps had started. His tactics were simple but effective. He would find a damaged ship and approach from its blind spots. Every ship had them, areas where sensors could not reach, where weapons could not aim. He had studied Dominion vessels for months. He knew their weaknesses better than their own engineers. He would get close, sometimes within meters of the hull. Then he would fire directly into critical systems, reactor cores, bridge sections, engine arrays, life support. He never wasted shots, he never missed. The Dominion crews never saw him coming. Their sensors were still scrambled by the nebula gas. Their communications were broken. They were alone and afraid, and then they were dead. When larger warships tried to trap him, he used the terrain against them. He would fly toward asteroid fields, letting them chase him. The Dominion ships were bigger and faster in open space, but in the tight corridors between the rocks they were clumsy. They crashed into asteroids. They collided with each other, flew through gaps that should have been too small for his ship, scraping paint from his hull, pushing his engines to their limits. The fighters were worse. The Dominion launched hundreds of small attack craft to hunt him. They were fast and deadly, designed to destroy ships exactly like his, but they had a weakness. Their pilots used sensors to see. Used his eyes. Humans had evolved on a dangerous world. They had hunted and been hunted for millions of years. Their eyes could spot movement in chaos. Their brains could find patterns in noise. These were gifts from ancient ancestors who had survived lions and wolves and the dark of night. When the gas scrambled sensors, the Dominion pilots were blind, was not. He led groups of fighters into dense gas pockets where their instruments showed nothing but static. Then he would cut his engines and drift, watching them fly past. He would come up behind them and fire. One shot, one kill. Then he would drift away before the others could react. He destroyed 47 fighters on the second day. The survivors refused to chase him into the gas anymore. Admiral tried to adapt. She was a brilliant commander who had won impossible victories before. She ordered her remaining ships into a defensive sphere, shields overlapping, weapons covering every approach. They would stop running. They would make the human come to them. It was a good plan. Against a normal enemy, it might have worked. But was not normal. He watched the defensive formation from a distance. He studied it for hours, looking for weaknesses. He found one. The sphere had gaps, small ones, barely large enough for a fighter to pass through. The Dominion had left them intentionally, escape routes in case they needed to retreat again. They assumed no enemy would be crazy enough to fly through those gaps into the center of their formation. They did not know. He waited until the third night. The Dominion crews were exhausted. They had been under attack for 70 hours. They had watched friends die. They had listened to screams on their radios. Fear and fatigue had worn them down. Powered down everything except life support. He drifted toward the formation on momentum alone, invisible to sensors, silent as death. He slipped through a gap between two destroyers, close enough to see the faces of the crew through the windows. He emerged inside the sphere. For a moment, he floated in the center of nearly 300 enemy ships. It was the most dangerous place in the galaxy. One wrong move, and he would be destroyed by crossfire from every direction. He was not afraid. He targeted the ammunition ships. Every fleet needed supply vessels, ships that carried missiles and fuel and spare parts. They were not warships. They had thin armor and weak shields. They were kept in the center of formations, protected by the fighting ships around them. Fired everything he had. The first ammunition ship exploded with enough force to shake nearby vessels. The second created a chain reaction with the third. Missiles cooked off inside their storage bays. Fuel tanks ruptured and ignited. The center of the defensive sphere became a ball of fire. The surviving warships panicked. They fired at the explosions, trying to stop the chain reaction. They hit each other instead. Ships that had survived 2 days of fighting were destroyed by friendly fire in seconds. Flew through the chaos, using the explosions as cover. He emerged from the other side of the formation and vanished into the nebula before anyone could target him. Behind him, 63 more ships died. Admiral stood on her bridge and watched her fleet burn. She had started with 500 ships. She now had fewer than 100. Most were damaged. All were terrified. Her officers looked at her with fear in their eyes. They wanted to retreat. They wanted to abandon the hunt and return home. They did not say it, but she could see it in their faces. She understood how they felt. She felt it too. For the first time in her long career, Admiral was afraid. The ghost was not just killing her fleet. He was breaking them. He was turning professional soldiers into frightened children. He was proving that all their power, all their technology, all their numbers meant nothing against one determined human. She remembered the reports about humans, weak, primitive, short-lived, a pest species barely worth noticing. The reports were wrong. Humans were survivors. They had crawled out of the mud of there and reached for the stars. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. They did not give up. They did not accept defeat. And when you hurt them, they hurt you back. Finally understood what the human wanted. He was not trying to escape. He was not trying to survive. He was trying to make them pay for what they had done to his people. And he was succeeding. Deep in the nebula stopped to rest. His ship was damaged. His body was exhausted. He had not eaten in 2 days. His hands trembled as he patched holes in his hull. But he smiled. The fleet was breaking. He could feel it. A few more attacks and they would shatter completely. A few more days and it would be over. He looked at its photograph. Almost there, he whispered. Almost done. He closed his eyes and slept for 4 hours. When he woke, he began planning his next attack. The wolf was still hungry, and the sheep were running out of places to hide. Admiral had not slept in 4 days. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Divine Conquest, and stared at the tactical display. Red dots marked the positions of her surviving ships. There were 91 left, 91 out of 500. The nebula around them glowed with the fires of the dead. Her officers moved quietly behind her. They were afraid to speak. They were afraid to breathe too loudly. The mood on the ship was dark and heavy, like the air before a terrible storm. Was thinking. She had risen through the ranks of the Dominion military through intelligence, not just strength. She had won battles that seemed impossible. She had crushed enemies who thought they were safe. She had earned her position through cunning and patience. Now she needed both. The human was not invincible. He could not be. He was flesh and blood, flying a single ship held together with stolen parts and desperate repairs. He had beaten them through preparation and surprise. He had used their arrogance against them. He had made them fight on his terms. That had to change. Called her surviving captains to a meeting via short-range communication. The nebula still blocked long-range signals. They could not call for help. They could not report their losses. They were alone. She looked at their faces on the screen. She saw fear. She saw exhaustion. She saw officers who had lost faith in victory. She needed to give them something to believe in. "The human is toying with us," she said. Her voice was calm and strong even though her heart was racing. "He could have destroyed us all in the first ambush. He chose not to. He wants us to suffer. He wants us to be afraid." The captains looked at each other. They knew she was right. "But fear is a weapon that cuts both ways," continued. "He expects us to run. He expects us to scatter and die one by one. We will not give him what he expects." She outlined her plan. The surviving ships would combine into a single formation. They would link their shields together, creating a defensive wall that no single ship could penetrate. They would pool their weapons into overlapping fields of fire. Anything that approached would face the guns of 90 ships at once. They would stop running. They would make the human come to them. "He is one man," said. "One ship. He cannot break through a formation of 90 warships. When he attacks, we will destroy him, and then we will go home." The captains nodded. Some looked hopeful for the first time in days. It was a good plan. It was a solid plan. Against any normal enemy it would work. But Park had stopped being normal a long time ago. He watched the fleet reform from the shadows. He saw the defensive formation take shape. He understood what they were trying to do. He admired the admiral's thinking. She was smart. In another life he might have respected her. But this was not another life. This was revenge. He needed a new approach. Attacking directly was suicide. Even his modified weapons could not break through 90 overlapping shields. He needed to break the formation from the inside. Then he remembered something he had salvaged from a destroyed Dominion ship. An emergency beacon. Every Dominion military vessel carried one. When activated, it broadcast a distress signal with a coded message. Had studied Dominion military protocols for months. He knew their codes. He knew their procedures. He knew that officers were never supposed to be captured alive. If an officer was taken prisoner, the protocol was clear. Kill them before they could reveal secrets. An idea formed in his mind. It was cruel and deceptive. It would make the Dominion soldiers turn against each other. He smiled. He modified the beacon to broadcast a specific message. The message said that Admiral had been captured. The message said she was requesting immediate execution according to protocol. The message said the human was torturing her for information. None of it was true, but the Dominion soldiers did not know that. He activated the beacon and let it drift toward the fleet. The effect was immediate. Confusion spread through the formation like a disease. Some captains received the signal and believed it. They thought their admiral was captured. They thought they should follow protocol and destroy the flagship. Other captains knew was still on her bridge. They thought the signal was a trick. Arguments exploded over the communication channels. "The admiral is captured. We must follow protocol." "It's a fake. The human is trying to trick us." "How do we know? We haven't heard from her in hours." "She's on the Divine Conquest. She's fine." "Then why the emergency beacon? Why now?" The formation began to drift apart. Ships that had been working together now pointed weapons at each other. Captains who had been allies now accused each other of treason. The unity that had built was shattering. On the divine conquest, heard the chaos and understood immediately what was happening. She grabbed her communicator and tried to restore order. All ships, the signal is false. I am here. I am not captured. Do not fire on each other. But her voice was just one among many. The argument grew louder. Some ships began powering weapons. Others raised shields against their own fleet. The defensive formation collapsed into a cluster of frightened, confused vessels. Saw his moment. He came screaming out of the darkness, engines at full power. The divine conquest was exposed now, its shield overlaps broken by the chaos. His flagship was vulnerable for the first time. Had prepared something special for this moment. During his months of raiding, he had found a plasma lance on a destroyed battlecruiser. It was a capital ship weapon, designed to punch through heavy armor at long range. It was too big for his ship. The recoil alone could tear his promise apart. He had installed it anyway. He fired. The plasma lance spoke with a voice of thunder and light. The recoil threw his ship backward so hard his restraints cut into his chest. Warning alarms screamed. His hull groaned. Something in the engine section cracked. But the shot flew true. It hit the divine conquest dead center. The plasma burned through shields that had held against 100 battles. It melted through armor that had survived collisions with asteroids. It punched through the bridge section like a needle through cloth. Admiral died instantly. She never saw the shot that killed her. One moment she was shouting orders, trying to save her fleet. The next moment she was gone. The finest commander in the Dominion military, killed by a single human with a stolen weapon. The divine conquest began to drift, fire spreading through its broken hull. Escape pods launched from every side as the surviving crew abandoned ship. The flagship that had conquered 100 worlds was dying. The rest of the fleet watched in horror. Their admiral was dead. Their flagship was burning. The formation they had built was already broken. There was no one left to give orders. There was no plan left to follow. There was only fear. Floated in the darkness, watching the chaos he had created. His ship was badly damaged. The plasma lance had cracked his main power conduit. His engines were barely functioning. He had maybe a few hours of life support left. But he had done it. He had killed the admiral. He had broken the fleet. The remaining ships were scattering in panic, running in every direction, crashing into each other in their desperate flight. He thought about her smile, her laugh, the way she looked at the stars with wonder in her eyes. He thought about the 46 graves on a lonely moon. I got her, he whispered to the darkness. I got the one who sent those orders. I got her for you. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was so tired. Every bone in his body ached. Every breath hurt. He wanted to sleep. But the job was not finished. Ships were still escaping. Soldiers who had murdered his crew were still alive. His revenge was not complete. He forced his eyes open. He forced his hands to move across the controls. He forced his damaged ship to continue the hunt. The admiral was dead. But the fleet was not. Not yet. The Dominion fleet died in pieces. Without admiral, there was no leadership. Without leadership, there was no coordination. Without coordination, 90 warships became 90 separate targets, each one alone in the burning nebula. Some tried to flee. They flew toward the edges of the gas cloud, desperate to reach open space where they could jump to safety. Hunted them through the asteroid fields. His ship was damaged, leaking air and fuel, but it still moved. It still fought. He caught the runners in the narrow passages between the rocks and destroyed them one by one. Some tried to surrender. They broadcast messages on all frequencies, begging for mercy. They said they were just soldiers following orders. They said they had families waiting at home. They asked for their lives. Did not answer. He did not negotiate. He remembered Space in her final moment. He remembered 46 bodies in a cargo bay. He remembered a commander who smiled as he ordered the executions. The Dominion had shown no mercy, neither would he. Some tried to fight. They formed small groups and turned their weapons toward the darkness, firing at shadows and sensor ghosts. Let them waste their ammunition. Then he came from angles they did not expect, targeting their engines and weapons first, leaving them helpless before finishing them off. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 3 more days. On the final day, only 7 Dominion ships remained. They had clustered together in the center of the nebula, surrounded by the wreckage of their fleet. They were out of ammunition. Their shields were failing. Their crews were starving. Ship was in worse condition. The plasma lance shot had cracked his main power conduit. His engines were running on backup systems. He had 17 minutes of oxygen left in his emergency tanks. 3 ribs were broken from the recoil impact. Burns covered 60% of his left arm where a power coupling had exploded. His collarbone had shattered when he crashed into an asteroid field 2 days ago. He should have been dead. Any reasonable person would have died long ago. But Park had stopped being reasonable the day they killed his wife. He approached the final 7 ships slowly. He had 1 missile left, 1 shot for 7 targets. It was not enough. He thought about ramming them, using his ship as a final weapon, taking as many as he could with him. Then he looked at the photograph of one more time. She would not want him to die here. She would want him to live, to see the stars again, to remember her with joy instead of rage. He could almost hear her voice telling him to stop, telling him it was enough, telling him to come home. He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I can't stop, not yet, not while they're still alive." He fired his last missile at the largest ship. It was a cruiser, wounded but still dangerous. The missile struck its reactor, and the ship exploded with a flash that lit the entire nebula. The explosion caught 2 smaller ships in its blast. They died screaming. 4 ships left, no missiles, almost no power, minutes of air. Flew toward them anyway. He did not know what he would do when he reached them. Ram them, maybe. Fire his remaining weapons until they overheated and exploded. Die fighting, like the warriors of old Earth who had faced impossible odds with nothing but courage and rage. But as he approached, something strange happened. The 4 remaining ships began to move, not toward him, away. They turned and flew in different directions, scattering into the nebula, running. Did not chase them. He could not. His ship was dying, his body was failing, he had nothing left to give. He watched the 4 ships disappear into the gas clouds. Some part of him knew they would not survive. The nebula was still full of his traps, gas pockets and mined asteroids and hidden dangers. Some or all of them would die before reaching open space. But he did not see it happen. He did not need to. 500 ships had come to hunt one human. 4 were running away. The rest were dead. Leaned back in his chair. His vision was going dark at the edges. His breathing was shallow. He had maybe 10 minutes before his air ran out. He used the last of his power for one final task. He activated his communication system and broadcast a message on all frequencies. Every ship in the sector would hear it. Every station, every colony, every species with ears to listen. "This is Park of Earth," he said. His voice was weak but steady. "Sole survivor of the research vessel Endless Dawn. 47 humans were murdered in Sector 7. 47 scientists, 47 innocents. My wife was among them." He paused. The static of the nebula crackled around his words. "The Helix Dominion called us pests. They called us contaminants. They left me alive to send a message of fear to my people. Instead, I send this message to them." He looked at the burning wrecks around him. 500 ships reduced to floating debris. "You sent 500 ships to kill one man. None of them are coming back, and I am still here." He ended the transmission. Then he closed his eyes and waited to die. He did not die. 8 hours later, a human patrol vessel found his ship drifting at the edge of the nebula. They were a small crew on a small ship, responding to his broadcast. They cut through his hull and pulled him out. He was unconscious, barely breathing, more dead than alive. They saved him anyway. The doctors worked on him for 6 months. They rebuilt his bones with metal. They grew new skin for his burns. They gave him blood and medicine and time to heal. When he finally woke, he found himself in a hospital on Earth, looking at a blue sky through a window. His first words were a question. Did they hear it, the message? The doctor smiled. Everyone heard it, Commander. The entire galaxy heard it. The message had spread like fire across the stars. 300 civilizations had received it. Species who had lived under Dominion rule for centuries listened to the humans' words and wondered. If one man could destroy 500 warships, what else was possible? If the masters could be beaten, why not rebel? Within a year, the Helix Dominion faced uprisings on 40 worlds. Their empire, which had seemed invincible, was cracking at the edges. The species they had conquered were waking up. They were fighting back. All because one man refused to die. The Dominion sent diplomats to Earth. They came with gifts and apologies. They offered treaties and reparations. They begged for peace. Admiral received them in the Great Hall of Earth's military command. She was a small woman with gentle eyes, but her voice was hard as stone. She had been a friend of S long ago. She had cried when she heard about the endless dawn. She was not crying now. Commander has a message for your High Council, she said. The Dominion ambassador leaned forward eagerly. Perhaps the human wanted to negotiate. Perhaps he wanted wealth or power or revenge on specific individuals. These things could be arranged. Admiral smiled. It was not a kind smile. He says he's not finished yet. The ambassador's face went pale. He tried to speak, but no words came out. On a balcony above the Great Hall, Park watched the exchange. He was still healing. He still walked with a limp. He still dreamed of every night. But he was alive, and he had work to do. The Dominion had built their empire on fear. They had believed that enough ships and enough soldiers could crush any enemy. They had been wrong. Humans were small. Humans were fragile. Humans lived short lives in a dangerous galaxy. But humans did not give up. They did not surrender. They did not accept defeat. And when you hurt them, they hurt you back. Looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was trembling. Their conquered peoples were rising. Their endless empire was beginning to fall. It had started with one man and one ship. It would end with fire across the galaxy. He touched the photograph in his pocket. He had carried it through everything. He would carry it forever. I kept my promise, he whispered. Now watch what comes next. The stars burned cold and bright above him. The hunt was over. The war had just begun.